I think so. And there's going to be some that are going to be saying simply a pox on both your houses. They're all involved in this, and we just don't like politicians. And then I guess theoretically, the argument for that is to vote in incumbents. But as we know, incumbents invariably get elected upwards of 80–90%. So it's been very hard for incumbents. Plus, many have been gerrymandered so much in the House of Representatives. The only way they could possibly lose is actually in their primary by not doing enough for their base. But I do think that ICE has become extremely controversial, and it's really become, if you will, an inflection point for some Democrats. They're saying, you stick with trying to with going against ICE, with saying that we need to have our demands met by the Republicans, or we're going to have some sort of a primary challenger, and that primary challenger is going to vote you out, something to that extent.
Yeah, I just wonder whether or not Republican voters as well as Republican lawmakers are rolling their eyes right now, saying, what the hell are you doing bringing ICE into this equation when it comes to TSA lanes? I don't see that as a real connection there. You mentioned Tom Homan. The borders are being brought into these conversations and these negotiations, trying to meet with those centrist Democrats to try to find common ground. What do you think that signals with President Trump once again relying on Tom Homan to get the job done in terms of the way the White House feels these negotiations are going?
I think he believes that Chuck Schumer is kind of a non-starter because of the reception he got from the Democrats last time, and because of the absolute animosity that he really effectuated amongst the Democratic base. If Chuck Schumer were to basically acquiesce, if he were to propitiate the president, if he were to make some sort of a deal with the president, this potentially could affect him as he runs for majority leader or minority leader, depending on who runs the Senate in the next election. And there are always some opponents that are running against incumbent members of the Senate in their primaries who are going against them for saying that you voted for Chuck Schumer as Senate Majority Leader. So he's really become a lightning rod, and he's become a boogeyman for the progressive wing of the Democratic Party right now. Folks like Graham Plattner in Maine, for example, is really been using Chuck Schumer as kind of a boogeyman, if you will. Right. So I think that I think that Donald Trump believes that the only way he can negotiate some sort of a deal here is to go over Chuck Schumer's head and deal with the more centrist Democrats and try to negotiate, because they've negotiated with them before.
Hey, Rich, let's get your opinion about this. This was a big development today, the passing of Robert Mueller. We know him as the former FBI director immediately following the 9/11 terror attacks. Also, of course, special counsel responsible for investigating possible Russian interference with that 2016 election. He died 81 years old. We just got a statement moments ago from President Barack Obama. He called him one of the finest directors in the history of the FBI, also one of the most respected public servants of our time. President Trump also releasing a statement saying he's glad Robert Mueller's dead. Obviously, we know the reason why President Trump might take a shot like that. What ultimately is the legacy that Robert Mueller leaves behind?
I think it's a maverick. He was obviously an avowed Republican, and he had worked his way up in Republican politics, but he was also someone who wasn't afraid to take on Republicans. And the first president he really took on was actually George W. Bush, who had actually nominated him to become the director of the FBI in the first place about a week before September 11th. In 2004, for example, when John Ashcroft was having gallbladder surgery, Ashcroft was the Attorney General. And the Bush administration were trying to kind of circumvent, and they were trying to use Mueller to try to, and they were trying to basically use some sort of a wireless wiretapping proposal. And Mr. Mueller basically looked at Mueller, and he said, basically, I'm not going to do this, and I could potentially resign. And then later in life, you saw him taking on President Trump, also Republican, albeit a bird of a different feather of the Republican Party. So he really was somebody who was, I think, really a government man. He was really a man of the institution, the second longest serving director, if you can believe it, in history, only behind J. Edgar Hoover. I think that's really what his legacy is going to be. Someone who is a maverick, someone who is willing to think independently and was willing to take on his own party and was willing to suffer the consequences of that if applicable.
Yeah, well said. Someone who was willing to stand up for what he thought was right. We do know he was suffering from Parkinson's in his most recent year.
Thank you for watching. Subscribe below and download our NewsNation app right now on your phone, and you will get fact-based, unbiased news for all Americans.